Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I'm your host, Ryan Dunlevy. That's my co-host, Rob Dunham.
We are live and in person because technology is dumb.
That's right. We tried to do this last night via Zoom, and it did not work.
Didn't Zoom so much.
Not so much Zoom.
More like came to a grinding halt.
For real. But we are with you here in person, and we have a very special episode. We're going to give you our top 10 movies of 2024. Plus some honorable mentions.
And I can tell you from some feedback from people who listen to the show, this is the most anticipated episode of the year.
Indeed.
Every year. People need to know what we know.
That's right.
Yeah.
So how we're going to do this is we're going to do a break from our usual format. We're not doing box office stuff. We're just going to hit the year review of movies. So we'll start out. I'll give you we'll give our general thoughts on the year in movies. We're going to go over some of the top grossing movies of the year, and then we'll get right into our top 10 movies of the year. So looking at a broad picture, what are your thoughts on 2024 in movies?
We've already hinted at this, but massive success, some unexpected, and massive failure when it comes to personal passion projects.
Yeah, and some of that also unexpected.
Yeah, at least not to the level that it actually failed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's one of the big takeaways for me. The other takeaway I have is this is one of the most disappointing years in movies that I have had since 2020. And that was external circumstances led to this. But I can tell you there were in so many weeks where I'm like, oh, I really want to go to a movie. That's what's out. Really? And I felt that way so much of the year. It's just like, all right. There were very, very few movies this year where I found myself super excited that they were coming out. There were a few, and we're going to get to some of them. But, I mean, I'm just used to a better level of movies. And I think some of that was holdover from the writers and actors strike, and stuff got delayed and got pushed back. Man, I thought it was a rough year of movies.
And I think I have a slightly different perspective just because, as those who listen to the podcast will know, I'm big into horror.
Yeah.
And so there's almost always something out. And some of these made my not honorable mention list, but I still enjoy that I got to go see them. And it seems like there's always something that I want to see.
Yeah.
But that's because I'm willing to subject myself to movies that I know are going to be bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. For sure. So that's just our general thoughts on it. But now let me go to our list of the top grossing movies of the year. And I thought this was a fascinating list. And I filtered this for in-year releases versus like stuff that just, only 2024 gross, the in-year releases. Any guess what the number one movie was?
I literally just looked at the list yesterday and I don't remember. Actually, I was looking at the worldwide list, so that's my excuse.
Okay. Yes, this is domestic box office, not worldwide gross, domestic box office. The top grossing movie of 2024 grossed $652 million, almost $653 million. It came out June 14th, and it was Inside Out 2. Yep, Inside Out 2 was the top grossing movie of 2024. And I thought it might do well, but I was very surprised because this was the one that kind of kicked up Pixar again. Second, Deadpool and Wolverine, $636 million. Number 3, Wicked, $453 million. And that's still being added to because that movie is still in theaters. And same with Moana 2.
Even so.
It's not going to get to. It will not catch. Moana 2 is at $434 million. Despicable Me 4, $361 million. Number 6, Beetlejuice, $294 million. 7, Dune Part 2, $282 million. Number 8, Twisters, $267 million. 9, Godzilla X Kong New Empire, $196 million. And the top 10, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, $195 million. And this one just came out on Christmas.
So out of the top 10 movies, 6 of them I think you could argue, are family movies.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. I think part of that is those have a potential of a wider range of audiences willing to go see them. Also, I think it states what people are more interested in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's going to make an impact going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would seem to lend you to believe people are looking for positivity when they go to the theater, especially if they're going with family, obviously.
Yeah. For sure.
Like escape.
Yeah.
Not being reminded about how bad the world is.
Yes. and not being lectured or preached at.
And the interesting thing is even the non-family friendly entrant in that top 5, Deadpool versus Wolverine, was more like lighthearted and comic than necessarily serious.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very interesting trend.
It is. I think the biggest outlier in there is Deadpool and Wolverine for a number of reasons. Yeah. It was the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. It comes at a time when Marvel is in a little bit of a disarray, and there was not much Marvel out in recent times. And so the fact that just blew everything up is really fascinating.
Well, I mean, all you have to do is look at the movie itself as Deadpool tells Wolverine, you've really entered at a low point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like they said it.
They literally opened and made jokes about it. They made jokes about Fox.
Yeah.
There was some good stuff in there for sure. All right. Well, that's just a little bit of a rundown of the top movies of 2024 and our general thoughts. Let's jump straight in to the box office, or to our top 10 list. And we'll start with our honorable mentions. Try to cap it as you can. So how we'll do it with the honorable mentions is we'll let you just give your honorable mentions, the whole list, briefly, if you have one or two lines about them, and then I'll do mine.
So I have like 12 honorable mentions, so I think I'm only going to hit like 4.
Yeah.
I want to talk about because they represent different groups of movies. So my first honorable mention, I'm going to say The Wild Robot. This is my family movie honorable mention. Thought the animation style was really good. I thought the story was heartwarming. It met my expectations. I was very happy with it. Honorable mention as far as scary movie goes, I will go with The First Omen. I thought it was the best cinematic scary movie I saw all year.
Okay.
Very easily could have been in my top 10, but I just liked a couple others more.
Sure.
Honorable mention for more of a serious movie, or I don't know if serious is the right word, but more dramatic movie, but also humorous. I'm going to go with Ministry of Gentleman Warfare, which I also think could have been in my top 10, but just didn't quite make it. But I wanted to give it a shout out. Deadpool versus Wolverine, I feel like has to be mentioned, even though it didn't make my top 10. And I'm just going to give one more. I might be the only person, Kevin, but I liked Horizon.
Okay.
Kevin Costner. Not many people did, apparently, but I
still would like to potentially see it. And
I thought it was a great Western epic.
Yeah.
It has not been done very often. It has not been done that well, especially recently, in my opinion, very often.
Yeah.
I thought it did not get the respect it deserved. So
fair enough.
There's some of my honorable mentions. I have more, but we'll save those. We are going to write this up, so you can go to the website and read what the rest of my honorable mentions were.
For sure. My honorable mentions, I picked 5 for my honorable mentions, and I basically just went down through my list, and all the top rated ones, I just listed them out and saw how many there were, or there was, and basically everyone is on this list. And so that tells you, like, I just didn't think that many movies were that good. Honorable mention, Challengers. Interesting movie. None of the characters are particularly redeemable characters. The score is amazing, and some of the tennis shots in there are really fascinating. And so there's some good cinematography elements in it. Not a great movie, but it had some interesting elements. Trap was another one that I really liked. It was entertaining. It was enjoyable. I think M. Night, we talked about this, M. Night Shyamalan is kind of leveled out. Like he's not hitting the highs of brilliance, but he's no longer in the lows. His movies are just solid. I thought Trap was along those lines. It had an interesting premise and concept that I like. I put Deadpool and Wolverine here. I'm not a huge fan of Deadpool, but I did actually enjoy this one. There were just so many quality jokes in there. It was way over the top at certain points, unnecessarily. And again,
The
like
first scene only involves him murdering an elite tactical crew coming to get him with the skeleton of Wolverine.
yeah. So I mean, it tends to be more over the top, and I like. But hey, it made that much money, and it was good. It was decent. Twisters. I thought about Twisters in the top 10, but I can't do it considering they put the entire soundtrack as country music. And that is literally my biggest ding about it. The movie itself is great. The country music is just too much, so it gets penalized for that, and justifiably so.
Reason.
And then my last honorable mention was Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Spy, Assassin. Really interesting profile of a really fascinating character from World War II era. I thought it was really well done. All right. Nice. Those are my honorable mentions. All right, so we'll do 3 in a row. Right. So you give me 10, 9, 8, and then I will do the same.
All right. 10 for me, The Fall Guy. Fall Guy, I think, was the most underappreciated movie of the year for how good a movie it was. I think a lot of it is due to when it came out. It's a summer movie. Should never have come out before the summer.
Yeah.
But I also think for some reason it just didn't connect the way they expected it was going to connect. Yeah. I mean, it was being advertised all over the place. So I think they thought it was going to have a broader reach than it did.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's any fault of Ryan Gosling. I don't think it's any fault of Emily Blunt or anyone involved in the movie because I thought it was great. And I laughed. I thought it was really good at being serious when you need to be serious. Just like everything about it. I think it's a great action movie.
I've really wanted to go back and see that one again. I still haven't seen it again since it came out in theaters, and I need to go back and watch that again. In fact, I think I might have not put it in my log, which is why it's not on my list anywhere. Because I did enjoy that. I did remember. And that's one of those that were like, why didn't people like this? Why didn't people go see this?
Yeah. My number 9 and number 8, I can kind of get together because they're both scary movies. Number 9 is Abigail. It's about a ballerina vampire teenage girl. She's like as crazy as you would expect it to be.
Yeah.
Very humorous writing, very cool difference in the characters. They did a good job developing them over the amount of time that they had to develop them. Number 8 for me, Smile 2, which I actually like more than the first one. If you haven't seen either, I'd recommend seeing both. But Smile 2 does a great job of deconstructing what it's like for someone popular to be in the spotlight so much that they kind of lose their mind and lose themselves in it and what's actually happening to the person.
Yeah.
And that's the question. That's what makes it scary, like how much of this is actually real. So those are my 10, 9, 8.
Nice. For me, my number 10 is The Outrun. This was Saoirse Ronan, kind of really slow burn character drama. Those are not always my favorite genre, but for whatever reason, around that time, I was in the mood for that type of movie. And so I went to see it. And I think Saoirse Ronan did an awesome job. She had a really, really great performance. It's about a girl who's a recovering alcoholic who kind of goes out to the countryside and is trying to figure it out. And there's a lot of cool shots of the Ireland coast and the Ireland countryside. So really, really cool natural shots. So the long landscape shots were really good. The acting performance from Saoirse Ronan was excellent, but it is a slow burn drama. So if that's your movie, The Outrun is good. Number 9 for me, I had Am I Racist? And this is the Matt Walsh documentary. And it turned out it did really well in the box office. It was the highest grossing documentary of the last decade. So some people do not like the tactic of it's more the kind of the Borat tactic of going in on semi unsuspecting people. But I enjoyed it. Number 8 was The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare for me. I really liked this movie. This is another one. I'm like, why didn't people go see this? I really liked it. Basically about an unknown, a spy group in World War II that was doing some clandestine missions for the British. trying to blow up supplies for the U-boats during World War II. And it was kind of under the table with Winston Churchill. Interestingly enough, Ian Fleming is one of the characters in this, and who obviously wrote the Bond novels and was the inspiration for Bond. And one of the characters in this movie is supposedly the inspiration for the James Bond character. So that's kind of a little backstory for this, but it's kind of fun. It's more lighthearted than you think for a World War II spy movie. There's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of it's not a heavy movie at all. Yeah. It's kind of fun and playful and enjoyable.
And it has all the Guy Ritchie hallmarks that you expect with great ensemble cast, a lot of witty dialogue. Sometimes you can't understand what people are saying, but that's just that's just how it goes.
Yeah,
Guy Ritchie movie.
Yeah, it's not, because it's more of a war film. It doesn't have like the full Guy Ritchie experience. It's not turned up to 11, like some of his other movies are, but it's really well done.
All right. Number 7 for me, Lisa Frankenstein.
Oh,
okay. Which I was very surprised when I went back and looked at. This came out like the beginning of the year. This was that it only made like $19 million worldwide, including domestic. So not very many people saw this. I thought this was a beautiful love letter to 80s comedy and just the 80s vibe. Set there, and Lisa brings the man of her dreams to life. And he comes alive, and he's this ancient guy that is in the middle of the 80s now and has to figure out how everything works, and they have to find different parts of his body and sew them back together. And it's really funny and absurd. Number 6 for me, on the opposite and complete opposite end of the spectrum, Nosferatu.
Okay.
Robert Eggers, starring Bill Skarsgård as Nosferatu and Nicholas Hoult as the guy who goes out to get him to buy property in England and Germany. So it's not Dracula because they couldn't make it Dracula, but it is the Dracula story. Just with some things changed. What I find really interesting is that Nicholas Hoult also played Dracula's assistant in Renfield, like Nicolas Cage was Dracula. So it's like the complete opposite ends. You could not have more opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes
in terms
to
of the character portrayal of Dracula,
which is great. It's like the same kind of character, but it's more opposite than you could possibly be. Number 5 for me, Beetlejuice, which when I first saw it, I thought maybe this would be like top 2 or 3. Honestly, I like it a lot, but there are just a few movies I like more. Maybe fair, maybe not fair. But this is a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, you should see it. You should probably watch the first one first, maybe a little more context. But even without the context of the first one, it's really just a funny movie. Michael Keaton is fantastic. He's a great actor. And the reason why I think he is a great actor is because he throws himself completely into his roles. He is Beetlejuice. And he came back and owned it. And there's actually more Beetlejuice in this movie than there was in the first Beetlejuice.
Interesting.
That's something that I really appreciate about it.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Number 7 for me is A Complete Unknown. And I just saw it recently, and it definitely made the list, but I've been going back and forth as to how high up on my list, and I have it down here because there's one key element for me that drops it, and I just don't know how far it drops it. It's the fact that, well, I'll start with this. The singing is great. The acting is great, in particular from Timothée Chalamet. And I thought the girl who played Joan Baez, Monica Barbera.
Yeah.
Also, I just recently watched Top Gun Maverick again, and I never made the connection. And so it wasn't until after I saw A Complete Unknown, I looked up who did play Joan Baez. I'm like, well, seriously?
Yeah.
So she was great. The singing was great. It did a good job of telling the story of what happened during those years. I don't feel like I know that much more about Bob Dylan, the person, as I did going into that movie. And I think that was a fail. Whereas if you look at just to pull one from recently, of Bohemian Rhapsody, I know a lot more about Freddie Mercury, the person, after watching that movie. I don't feel like I know that much.
I'm going to counter this when I get to Complete Unknown on my list.
Okay. I haven't gotten there yet. Because I was looking for that.
I'll give you a slightly different perspective.
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. So that's why it's at 7 on my list. I thought about dropping it down closer to 10, but I don't. I think the rest of it is very, very good, and so I have a hard time. I have a hard time docking it too much, but I do feel like that's just an element that I didn't love. Uh, Number 6 for me is Juror Number 2. Now, I am one who tends to lean very heavily towards box office as opposed to like movies that came out on streaming services. Um, I don't blame this for not coming out in theaters. I blame Warner Brothers for not releasing it. There's no reason this film shouldn't have come out in theaters.
Side note, my friend Keith's cousin is in this movie.
Really?
Yeah, he's like a part actor. Like he plays like just random roles. Like he's driving the car in one of the scenes in Fly Me to the Moon with Channing Tatum. That kind of thing. Like he's just there in different scenes. Nice. He's in this. Yeah.
Cool. But it was a cool courtroom drama. It has a unique premise, a unique twist to the premise. And I think I am a sucker for a unique premise. And that was Trap was like that. Juror Number 2 is like that, where it has some 12 Angry Men vibes to it. The pacing is good. The acting is solid. There's a mystery element of like, what is he going to do? Now, some of the minor characters left a little bit to be desired in some of their things, but overall, it was a very solid movie and one I thoroughly enjoyed, and it should have been in theaters more. And number 5 for me was Slingshot. This is a movie that made very little money. It was only out in theaters for a very short amount of time, although it is on a streaming service. I just saw it came out on the streaming service. I'm forgetting which one, maybe HBO Max or maybe
I can look it up very quickly.
Yeah. So I'll talk about it a little bit and we'll get you that data. But it's an interesting movie. It's got Lawrence Fishburne, it's got Casey Affleck, and they're basically a 3-man crew going out on a very deep space mission, and things start going wrong. And they're trying to decide what is real and what's not real as they're kind of losing their minds out in deep space. So it's a really interesting, like, psychological drama set in a sci-fi deep space setting, kind of that classic sci-fi of like waking up from hyper sleep.
Yeah, it looks like it might be on Paramount Plus.
Paramount Plus. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I know I saw it on one recently. So Paramount Plus is what it's on. But it's an interesting movie. If you like good sci-fi premises that have a psychological bent to it, Slingshot is really good.
Nice. All right. My number 4 is The Complete Unknown. Okay. And so my counter to what you said is one of the things that is most well known about Bob Dylan is that people don't know much about Bob Dylan. The other thing that is most known about Bob Dylan is that he's a cantankerous asshole a lot of the time and doesn't like to do what people want him to do. And that's very clearly portrayed in the movie.
Yes.
And that has continued on the rest of his life. So I have a friend who has seen Bob Dylan twice in concert. He told me it's the 2 worst concerts he's ever been to because you go to the concert expecting to hear like the songs that you heard in A Complete Unknown. Yeah. He doesn't play those. He doesn't play Dust in the Wind. He doesn't play or Blood in the Wind. He doesn't play any of the other popular songs because he doesn't want people to tell him what to do. So he'll literally get up there now and play something he wrote that morning that no one knows, or like a random B-side from the 80s that no one remembers because it's what he wanted to play that day.
Yeah.
So my argument to you about I didn't learn a whole lot about Bob Dylan is I think the movie does a good job of portraying like everything about Bob Dylan that Bob Dylan would want you to know about him, which is almost nothing.
Yeah.
You never really know what his motivations are. Why is he with this girl at this time? Why is he with this other girl at this time? Is it just because he's bored? Is it just because he's lonely? Why does he want to play this style of music at one point and then this other style of music at one point? The thing that I learned about, and I knew about Bob Dylan, but I learned a little bit more watching this movie. The guy was, and I don't know if you can still say is, but I would probably assume he's just a musical genius. The ability to pull songs out of thin air, like it's like some of his most famous songs he wrote like the morning and then performed them the first time at night, like Blowing in the Wind. he literally wrote In the Morning and performed it for the first time live in concert that night, and it became like one of the biggest songs, arguably in folk music history.
Yeah.
Times they are changing, same thing. And this guy, like, he was envied and admired by, you saw it in the movie Johnny Cash,
Yeah.
by all these other musicians, and but he has always gone to the beat of his own drum.
Mm-hmm.
Will continue to do so until he's dead. And one other thing that I find really interesting is that Bob Dylan himself has fully endorsed this movie and said, like, this represents, you know, who I was and what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that has it so high for me, Timothy especially, he's playing and singing every song in the movie.
Yeah.
He plays like 40 songs in this movie. The amount of time that he had to put in to learn these things, because they're not just simple strumming guitar songs. These are actually, like, he wrote songs where there was a lot of movement, and there are a lot of like decent guitar players who it would take them time to figure these songs out. And the fact that he was able to do it, and I love Ed Norton.
Yeah,
and Ed Norton
is always good. Yeah,
and Ed Norton playing the banjo, and it was so cool for me to watch the credits. And when I always wait for the soundtrack. When the soundtrack came up, it's like performed by Timothy Chalamet and Ed Norton, performed by Monica Barbero. Like everything was performed by them.
Yeah,
and it's super impressive. Even Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. One other note about this movie: it was directed by the same guy who directed Walk the Line, James Mangold. But he decided to not put Joaquin Phoenix in the movie because Johnny Cash in this movie is a younger version. And he said he didn't think it'd be fair to Joaquin Phoenix to have him try and play that younger Johnny Cash.
Yeah.
And Boyd plays, there are glimpses of this Johnny Cash in Walk the Line, but this is like full on jerk, like drunk, not really caring about other people, Johnny Cash in this movie. But also just like supremely talented musician. Johnny Cash, and he absolutely kills playing like Folsom Prison Blues at the Newport Folk Festival in the movie. If I watch this movie a couple more times, it might even be higher than number 4. I mean, I've seen it twice. And each time I've loved it.
Yeah, and like I said, the performances are great. I think I would like to, even if they couldn't go into what his motivations for. You've seen other movies that do this that will speculate or that they'll spend more time trying to pull that out of what it might be or what. And I just wish they'd have done more on that. But I get what you're saying.
My number 3 is Furiosa, Mad Max Furiosa, which it's probably even more criminally underrated than Fall Guy was.
For real.
Because this is just a phenomenal movie.
This is another, I don't understand why people didn't go see it. I don't.
And you can make an argument for which one is better, Mad Max or Furiosa. I think I like Furiosa better because I like drama, and I like how they spent a little more time individually on the characters and developing a story. Because Mad Max Fury Road is really just a car chase.
It's a fantastic extended car chase, but it's an action car chase for sure. This is very different.
Number 2 for me, and this will probably upset some people or whatever. Doom Part 2 is my number 2.
Okay. All right.
For reasons that I will explain when I get to my number 1 movie, but this movie deserves to be number 1. It's probably like 1A and 1B. This man, just absolutely beautiful movie, absolutely beautiful storytelling by Denis Villeneuve. The first 2 movies combined are just a masterpiece. Yeah. And Timothy, man, you're doing something right. Dune Part 2, Wonka, A Complete Unknown.
It's been a good couple of years for me.
I'm starting to really think that it's probably not just the movies. Like, this guy he's an actor. And he's also a very big sportsman, if you didn't know that.
I did, yeah.
Either that or he's very, very good at acting. Like, he's a very good big sportsman because he knows his stuff, it seems like.
At what point have you acted so well in something that you just are in?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. It's really interesting. Okay. We'll have to have a discussion about that because I think I know what your number 1 is at this point, but we'll get to that. So number 4 for me is Joker Folie à Deux. And this is another movie that a lot of people had a lot of things to say about this. And I might be unique in why I like the movie. I could take or leave most of the musical numbers. In fact, I thought at some point it's like, all right, are we doing another one? Really? Okay. Because I'm not really a musical fan. I thought it was fascinating how they dealt with how society handles criminality and the different aspects through which they did it. Where one group of people is trying to push, well, he's just a victim of society. It's not his fault, you know. So they have an exploration side of that. They have a side that's like, he's the revolutionary anti-hero, you know, he's our favorite. You have another one that just says like, all right, this, you know, this guy is just a criminal and needs to be locked up, you know. And so he's caught, Joker is kind of caught in the middle of all these people pulling him in one direction or another, saying, this is what you are, this is what you are. And to watch him kind of resist each one of those in some way, shape, or form. But I thought it was a fascinating exploration about how modern society views criminality. And so that exploration I thought was really, really fascinating. And um, so from that aspect, I thought it was really good. And it, for me, it wasn't as dark. It wasn't quite as dark as the first one, which I know is some of the reasons why some of the people didn't like it as much, along with the musical numbers and those sorts of things. But I thought from that aspect, it was well done and worthy of a spot in the top five. Number three for me was Gladiator 2. And if you listen to our instant reaction on Gladiator 2, you would see that there was definitely split feelings amongst our crew who went to the movie as to some like absolutely hated and thought it was bad. I actually liked it. I thought it was a good movie. It was a solid action movie. It's hard to, because it's impossible to look at Gladiator 2 and not compare it to the masterpiece that is Gladiator. But I think even on its own, it stands up as a solid, very good action movie. So for me, I listed that as number three. And for me, number two, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. This one surprised me because I was expecting more of the action that we've come to expect from the Mad Max series. But for them to kind of use all the amazing visual elements and then turn it into a really fascinating character drama was a really cool pivot. And I found myself really engaged in it, really enjoying it. And what they did with the characters and how they built the world around it and got you to where it was really, really cool. And the way they tied it in, I just thought it was remarkable what they did with this movie. And it still blows my mind that, that more people didn't appreciate it. All right, man.
So one other side note, the movies that I'm hearing the most buzz about when it comes to wars are like The Brutalist and Anora, which are two like indie movies that honestly neither of us might ever see. So I want to acknowledge that like people are talking about these movies, but at the same time, like the whole point and purpose of one of the main purposes of our podcast is to talk about movies that people go and watch.
This year, because of the way the year has gone, it's just going to be brutal Oscar nomination. It's going to be a whole bunch of films that nobody has seen, that nobody has any desire to see. I mean, I do have a friend who's big into movies, who's enthralled with Anora. But you know, just so many movies that nobody will have seen are going to be nominated for. It's just going to exacerbate the already existing split between the movie going audience and the critics. And I mean, The Brutalist has not even been in theaters anywhere around here. Like you couldn't have even seen it if you wanted to. And so it's going to be a number of ones where they'll come into theaters so that people can watch them ahead of the Oscars. And that will literally be the only time anyone has a chance to see any of these movies.
So my number one movie is Wicked. And this doesn't necessarily have this is going to sound counterintuitive, right? But it doesn't have as much to do with the fact that it was the best movie of the year, as much more to do with how it made me feel and how I was able to connect with my kids through this movie. Because I was able to sit in the theater with, I watched this movie individually with each of my kids, and then I was able to sit in the theater on Christmas Day for the sing along and hear my kids sing to the movie. And as a dad, that means something more to me than a movie just being a great movie, because it provided a collective experience for me with my kids that they're finally getting to the age where I can have that kind of moment. And so I love the movie. I think it's great. I don't think it's the best movie that came out this year, but it is the number one movie for me. That's the main reason why. I love musicals. I love the musical Wicked, and I think they could not have done a better job of putting it on screen. So with all those factors combined is why it's top of my list.
Yeah, and I completely get that for sure. And that makes total sense, because half of why you go to the movies is for the experience, what you're experiencing in there. And it's so much more fun when you can experience it with other people. That's one of the reasons why we love going to premieres. Because you get to experience it with all the people who care the most about the movie. And then you get to turn around and do that with your kids is really cool.
Just a fast forward here, there will be an instant reaction podcast after the midnight showing of Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. I can almost guarantee.
Oh, for sure.
That's gotta happen.
It's gotta happen. Yeah, 100%. 100%. And I'm my daughter's 3, almost 3, and so I haven't had the experience. Like, we're not ready to take her to the theater. She's not quite ready for that, but I will look forward to be able to experiencing stuff like that with her for sure. Number 1 for me, Dune Part 2. And you laid out some of your thoughts. I will echo every single one of them. It's the production, the direction, the cinematography, the acting, the score. By the way, Hans Zimmer not eligible for the Oscar for Dune Part 2 because they've ruled that he used too much of his score from Dune Part 1, which Denis Villeneuve basically said that's awful and unjustified. But I mean, you can understand why he used enough, because it's one story in 2 movies. And so it would make sense that you would reuse some of your score. But it was such a phenomenal action movie and drama, like the combination of drama and action and the way it escalated the story. And it's just such an epic world. And Denis Villeneuve is so amazing at creating epic worlds. Kind of what Ridley Scott did in the 80s with creating lots of epic worlds. You absolutely have that with Denis Villeneuve in the last decade or 2. So I had no choice for me but to put it Dune Part 2. And this movie was supposed to come out last year. And we had a brief conversation about, had Dune Part 2 come out when it was supposed to come out originally, how would that have changed Oscar interactions from last year? But it should be nominated for Best Picture. It won't be. And it's just continued trend of that happening. But I really, it's so good. And the colors and the sounds and the visual elements are really, really cool.
It's a unique combination of a movie that is objectively done to a phenomenal degree, combined with the subjective reaction of the audience, because a lot of people saw this movie and made a lot of money. You don't usually have both. Typically, it seems like a lot of people go to a movie that's not as great, or people don't go to a movie that's amazing. And this found that common ground. Like I said, I don't know if there's this groundswell behind Timothée Chalamet. Like, is he building this now, or is this because of the success of the first movie? Is it a combination of these things? Is it just a sci-fi thing? Like, people are just dying for any good science fiction movie? I think it's a little bit of all those things.
It is. I think it's the source material. It's Denis Villeneuve. It's the actors. Like, it's Denis Villeneuve has very similar thing going for him that Christopher Nolan does. Christopher Nolan is probably at a slightly higher level, but it might just be that Denis Villeneuve is like 5 years behind where Christopher Nolan is, just because of the way their careers are. I think this is at least the 3rd time since I started doing top 10 movie lists that I've had a Denis Villeneuve movie as my top movie. I definitely had Arrival and Blade Runner 2049. and now Dune Part Two. I just can't remember if I had Dune at number one or number two. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. But so I've had at least three Dennis Villeneuve movies. My top movies. And I've probably been doing top 10 lists for maybe about a decade now, or something like that. So that's, I mean, his work speaks for himself. He's a very, very good director.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts? This is probably the most different our lists have been since we've been doing this podcast.
So I looked through the box office top 100 and I saw 50 of them.
Interesting.
Most of them were in the theater.
Interesting.
So this has been, this has probably been the year I've gone to the most movies since I started going to movies. A lot of that would be down to the fact that I had the Regal subscription, and that allowed me to go see movies more often. A lot of that is down to the fact my kids are a little bit older, so I have a little more flexibility in my schedule.
Yeah,
I don't need to be home every single night to tuck them into bed because they put themselves to bed at this point. However, that's probably going to change over the next year. I'm looking at some changes in my own movie going plans and what I'm subscribed to and what I do. We can talk. We can and will talk about that in the future. Podcast episode. Some of the options that you might have.
Sure.
If you're interested in going to movies on a regular basis, because there are some intriguing possibilities out there for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, I think it was a little bit of the opposite because I still have a young daughter, and so my options are limited in terms of like I have to go to later showings, and then not every movie has a showing at the right time, and so it can be hard to arrange my schedule to go see everything I want to see, and then combine that with the fact of if I have to do all these crazy hoops to go see a movie, I want it to be one I actually want to see, and not just something that's like, oh, we'll see what's in there and go, and so to be disappointed with some of the what was out there was tough. That being said, I like my top 10. So thank you for tuning into Film for Fans. This has been our top 10 movies of 2024. Be checking out filmforfans.com as soon we will have our written article up on our top 10 movies plus our honorable mentions. Before we head out, we did have one more thing we wanted to do.
The
dishonorable mentions. So before we end it, let's end it with that. Dishonorable mentions. What do you got?
So, like I said, I go to a lot of scary movies, and sometimes they're not very good. So my dishonorable mentions are all scary movies. Never Let Go, starring Halle Berry, which is about her kids and her living in this forest where they're hiding out from things that are possessed, and are they possessed? And I don't really know what's happening, and I still don't know what happened. The Exorcism with Russell Crowe was probably the worst exorcism movie I've seen, mainly because it was like completely over the top, and like every single scene when there was something bad about to happen, the lights were flickering, and you're just like, come on, guys, have a little nuance with things, Arcadian with Nicolas Cage, just because the creatures were absurd in the movie and not scary, because just when they started to attack, they lost all their scariness with the sounds they made, and it was just kind of like a caricature of what a scary movie should have been. But my most dishonorable mention, the worst movie I saw here was Bagman, which is about a mythical creature coming to steal good children and put zippering them up in his magic bag. And I don't understand why still, and I don't understand the accents that were used in the movie or the plot of the movie or anything about the movie. It got a 1 star from me out of 5. It really is like out of 100. Don't see Bagman unless you want to laugh at something. Then maybe do. I don't know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I have 2 dishonorable mentions, and they're for 2 entirely different reasons. Madam Web, I think, was the worst movie I saw this year. The premise was bizarre. The characters were bizarre. Like the bad guy was utterly it was just unbelievable. Literally, like I did not believe anything he was doing or saying. Like it was just such a terribly made movie. It really was. It was terrible. And then they were way too subtle in their head that this was connected to Spider-Man because nobody picked up on that. It was just a bad movie, and it's unfortunate because it could have been good, but it wasn't. The other one I will do, and for entirely different reasons, and I'll explain, is Conclave. Conclave, 90% of Conclave is actually really fantastic and was really well acted and had some really intriguing drama and characters going back and forth and kind of basically after the death of the Pope trying to decide who's the next Pope. But if you've ever had those movies that you've watched the whole movie and it's building towards something, and then once you get to the moment where it reveals what it's building towards, you're like, oh, and it's just a complete letdown. That was Conclave for me. Like where they ended up going with it after they spent all the time building this up, I was like, really? That's where you went? All right. So it just brought the whole thing down for me. So I couldn't appreciate it for that. So it could have been a very good movie had they gone a different direction.
And maybe if Ryan had gone to the right theater and seen it from the beginning, that
was also the case where I famously went to the wrong theater, and instead of going to the 11:40 showing, I went to the 11 o'clock showing and missed the first half hour. Side note, I did go back and rewatch the first half hour of that movie, and so it doesn't make me change my opinion about the movie, but it makes a whole lot more sense. So, all right. That's all the time we have. Check out filmforfans.com and like, subscribe, tell your friends. Until next time, enjoy the movies.